Hi everyone. Not everyone now, because you won't be on yet, but I'm saying everyone now because I'm in my lounge and I've not got my intro. So I have to fill space and time until you arrive with my pucker brew, which I was given from this morning today. The lady who does the green room knows that I like peppermint tea, so she gave me 2 lots to bring home. And I'm northern, I'm from a working class background, so anything free is good. Even if I don't even like the stuff that I'm getting, I'll still take it if it's free. As long as it wasn't harmed in the making of it. Not like a piece of steak or something, I wouldn't take one of those. How are we all? Nice to see you. I'm going to be going through the questions shortly, but I'm sure that we are all feeling a little bit deflated tonight. I'm going to say that. By the way, I've just seen myself on the screen and my face looks bizarre. I look a very odd colour today. So I'm afraid that the lighting probably doesn't look very good on me, but it's okay. I don't mind the fact that I look like a strange colour. Never mind. But sorry, I got distracted because I saw your questions coming up there and I was like, oh, I can see myself. I look bizarre. Anyway, no discredit to the makeup artist from this morning today. It's very good. But I'm sure we're all completely pissed off. So let's just stay in that moment and just acknowledge that moment. When I hear things like most of the UK likes lockdowns, most of the UK supports lockdowns, it's like, no, they don't. People who take YouGov polls support lockdowns, and people who vote Conservative, which I know seems to be the majority, most of them vote Conservative only because Keir Starmer was worse when it came down to lockdowns. The very fact that Keir didn't get anywhere near the votes he should have is because he just went, oh, well, I'll lock down more. I looked at the YouGov polls and the YouGov polls say that they like lockdowns, so let's go for it. That's not the majority, that's the bloody minority. And you can see that even on social media, where you think that Twitter is one of those places where a lot of times you get 77th Brigade and you get a lot of propaganda. Even that's kicking off because people are just like, I'm done, it's too much now. And I did know it was going to get extended. I'd had my tour cancelled last week for postponement because of the fact that they're not going to let social distancing end. So I knew. But I've also known for ages, because it's been out there for a long time, that there's no way that these restrictions are going to end in this context. So just want to acknowledge how crap it is for us, because it doesn't matter how long we've been dealing with this. Every extension just breaches that bit of trust. And I think that one of the things that the UK has always had, to some degree up until the last 15 months, has been this sense that we probably are one of the luckiest countries in the world, that we have a democracy, remember what that used to feel like, and that people can have a chance here, no matter where you come from, no matter what your background. You know, of course, the luck is born in what postcode to what parents, I get it, but still, when it comes down to it, compared to in other countries where there isn't that luxury, then we are still blessed, aren't we? And that's always been the way I felt about it until really recently. So I think a lot of us have had our trust in what we've expected in our environment really undermined. And on top of that, we're in a situation where we just feel there's no certainty. So where mental health is concerned, that's what we look for a little bit. We look for a little bit of foundation. I always say security is a myth, but we still have certain foundations. And like I said, being in a democracy and feeling that even though there is always corruption, that there was less corruption, and even though there's hypocrisy wherever you go, there wasn't as much hypocrisy. And then watching what I can only see as the past few days with G7, the biggest pantomime I've ever seen, where it literally is one rule for one and one rule for another. And I'm not sure why anybody in the press or in politics thinks that the normal average human being is going to be able to sit there and stomach that. And like what that says as well about the way that we feel about our local communities, the way that we feel about individuals within our communities who are really struggling at this moment in time. What does it say about those? What does it say about any of us who are in that kind of pain? So I just wanted to acknowledge it, because the thing I've said from day one is that human beings are really unpredictable. It's why serial killers keep killing, because they never get that absolute ultimate kill. They always want to kind of go for the fantasy that they're playing out in their head. And so it never works out how it's meant to work out, which is why they always do it again. So human beings, not that we're serial killers, we're not human predators like they are, but human beings are unpredictable. We are. We fight back, or sometimes we subserve. It doesn't tend to go down one road or another. It just happens to be however that human being responds and reacts in that moment. Even the human being won't be aware. And so there's this whole amount of unpredictability about the world. So what is now will not continue to be. That's one thing I trust, because human beings are unpredictable. So people can believe that it will go a certain way, but it rarely, if ever, does. And if it does, it really ends well for the people who push it. History has taught us that. So just try to hold on a little bit more. Try to remember that you're not on your own. I know we keep saying that you're not alone, but it's felt very alone. And just remember that you've got people who are rooting for you. And like, it's understandable now. It doesn't matter where you were on the spectrum, whether you were a lockdown fanatic, whether you're a lockdown skeptic, whether you believe in restrictions, whether you don't believe in restrictions initially. Where we are now, I think everyone's at a point where we've got some agreement, which is it's too much now. It's too much for the economy. It's too much for other illnesses. We have cancer, we have heart disease, we've got diabetes, we've got all these massive problems. We've got major impact on addiction, major impact on mental health where children are concerned. You know, we don't have the resources to just look after one condition anymore. And I think that as opposed to it being quite divided before, we're all coming to a very similar resolution now, which is no more. And it's nice when I see on Twitter those kind of things, I'm done and no more, trending, because it says something about the spirit within us. And like I said, it doesn't matter where we were or where we are on our personal view base. I think everyone's at that point where we can all agree that this is not going to be good for mental health, physical health, emotional health. It's not going to be good for children's health. And we can't continue this endless cycle of just promising and taking away, promising and taking away. And also this endless cycle of restricting what makes us human. Nice to see that weddings got past it. I am glad about that, because that makes sense. I'm completely for it. Everybody should be open. Those hospitality industry that's being ravaged, it should be open. So don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, we're back at that point, aren't we? Where when we started this, there were those rules that came in and none of it made sense, you know, didn't attack people after 6 o'clock at night or whatever. Those things make no sense. So why can hospitality not open, but weddings can go on unlimited? Like, why isn't a scientist being asked that question? Because if you answer the question, which is, well, we think that there isn't transmission, then hospitality can open. So it can't be answered, can it? Can't even take the mic like I used to. I'm just really angry with them now. Right, a lot of you talking about lockdown's impact. Obviously, that was going to be the case tonight. Lockdowns have affected my mental health even more. I can't wear a mask. Good, don't wear a mask. Don't wear it. You don't need to wear a mask. You feel like you're an alien when you walk into shops. You're really struggling now. It's really strange. My husband had this conversation with me not an hour ago, because he was talking about the way that people look at you when you're not wearing a mask in shops, and the fact that there's almost like this wanting to take you on. That's their problem, not yours. You have to always look at what the hostility is about and who it's coming from. They don't know you. It's not personal. It might feel it. It's not. It's just their schema. It's their belief system. So one, depersonalize it. You don't know them. You don't like them. You're not in love with them. You're not going to go off into a future with them. So they're irrelevant to you. They mean nothing. You'd be nice to them if they had a heart attack, but they mean nothing. So eradicate their perspective from your mind. Secondly, you don't have to excuse yourself to anybody for your behaviour. You are a free human being with a free consciousness. We need to remember that. Your job is to be true to you. Your job is to be true to who you are and what you think and feel. Your mental health is affected by masks because anybody who has been anxious or felt stressed at times or has been in a situation of abuse or just hates them and feels mentally impaired when they wear one, you're entitled to not wear one. Burn them. Because empirically, there is no reason to wear them for a start. So evidence-based wise, it doesn't exist. So their moral policing is based on shoddy science. That's on them. But where we find our compassion for these individuals who seem to go out of their way to want to give you a bad time, remember where it's coming from. Okay, there'll be 5% who are just born that way. We all know them. They're the neighbour who comes out because you're like 1 inch over what they consider as their parking space, even though you pay road tax and it's on a main road. That kind of person. It's the individual who would write on an ambulance, "You're blocking me in," when they're trying to deal with a heart attack on the street. So you got 5% who are just arses, and it wouldn't matter what you did. Even if you were going in wearing like a hazmat suit, they'd be like, "It's not the right hazmat suit." So you've just got to kind of let that go. But when it comes down to the 95% who are looking at you like that, just feel compassion for them. They've bought into it. They've been absolutely convinced and traumatized by the narrative that's gone. It doesn't matter what data's out there. They've just bought lock, stock, barrel into every fear. And therefore, they are living that concern. They believe that mask protects them, and they believe that you're risking their health. So what you get from them is a very real feeling that they're experiencing. But you have to help them to manage that by exposing them to reality. You are actually helping them to form an understanding that somebody can walk past them without a mask on and they won't die. And as every single person starts to walk past them without a mask on and they don't die, they'll start rethinking their lived experience. And that will help them as they ease to a point where they too take their mask off and realize that they won't die. So you're actually helping them. Compassion is important. Confidence when you've got mental health issues is problematic, I know. But you've got to be proud about the choices you've made because you're choosing you. If I hear somebody tell me that my children need to protect other people, but by doing that I put my children at risk, I think that I'll put myself at risk of getting arrested. Don't you tell me to care more about some stranger I've never met who probably wouldn't do me a favour than my own children's well-being. Do one. That's the reality of being human. I'm an animal. I have a very protective, note predatory element to my basis and being. You attack, you harm, my fold, I will respond accordingly. That's nature, right? So you, looking after you, that's your job. You first, then your family, so you can look after them too. You just need to own that a bit more. So depersonalize it. It's not about you, it's about their trauma. Show compassion. It's not about them, it's about their conditioning. And also walk with your head held high without your mask, because you have a right. And no one else defines your reality, only you. So move through it, breathe through it. Remember what I've said when you're doing it. And you're helping educate them every time you take a step past them, okay? Hi Emma, any tips on how to handle anxious thoughts? I saw my therapist face to face recently, and I'm so scared that she thinks less of me because she's seen face to face because of my appearance and how I feel about myself. Sorry if this doesn't make any sense. I'm so anxious and paranoid. When we feel more anxious, we do feel more paranoid. It's one of those things, it like puts us on high alert, doesn't it? You sit there and you kind of overanalyze every single thing that you've ever done in the world. You have a conversation and you'll walk away and it'll have been a perfectly reasonable conversation, and then at home you'll just sit there and you'll dissect it into a million pieces and be like, they definitely thought I was stupid. It's just the way that anxiety presents itself, isn't it? The overanalysis and catastrophization of our thought processes, it's just the way it is. Like today, I've noticed that because I'm really tired and communication is my thing, that whenever I get tired, my brain will start kind of dropping communication keys, so I won't be able to speak as well as I normally can. And it's a real anxiety thing for me. So I'll focus on the 2 words I stumble on, not the words that I'm able to coordinate. So everyone has a thing that they'll analyze. And I'm quite good at managing my anxiety these days. But today was kind of a big day because yesterday I went down to this morning for the first time, as in staying over in a hotel, going to the studio today. It's a big deal. I've not done that for a year, and it was really nice to see people, but there was a big provocation to anxiety, which was like, usually when I was there, even though it's been just coming up for 2 years since I lost my dad, when I was there, I would always have this moment in the morning where I'd be like, oh, my dad's so proud of me. And waking up this morning and thinking I've not got to text him was a real moment. Even though I've done that before, there was something about having this gap that I kind of thought, what was it that used to make those mornings so special when I was in the hotel? And it would always be that I'd be texting him and he'd be like, I'll look after you afterwards. And I'll tell the girls at Marks and Spencer's, because Mum and Dad had a really bizarre relationship with the girls at Marks and Spencer's. They all came to his funeral, God bless them. But that's certainly, anxiety does that. It kind of presents in certain cycles, doesn't it? So with you, it feels like the therapist is kind of a metaphor, an analogy for how you feel about the world. So if we can take the most accepting person, the person that we've got the safest relationship, the person that we know can non-judgmentally accept us and just unconditionally positively regards us, and make them judgmental, we've kind of made the world an entirely unsafe place, haven't we? So you think about what your therapist represents. They represent safety, they represent an opportunity to express and explore the self, and like I said, they represent complete acceptance. So when you go and you think to yourself, I'm disappointing my therapist doesn't like the way I look, I've put on 2 pounds, my therapist knows, you're actually denying yourself any sense of acceptance in the world, because they are the safest place you will go. So can you see how that is a sabotage of what would be a really good environment? Now, the good thing is you're in therapy. So you're going to take that back to her. If you need, keep this little bit. It'll be on YouTube or wherever, on Facebook, and just record the little bit that I'm talking about now, because your therapist will be like, yep, that's what you need to do. The fact that you're having these feelings need to be taken to therapy. You need to express them as you have to me, and you need to explain that this is something you want to work through. I know that's scary, but it's the right thing to do. That's why we go to therapy. We're like, I've had these really weird feelings recently, and they are that when I leave here, you're ashamed to be my practitioner. You think I'm failing. You don't think I'm very good at what I do. You don't think I look nice. You're judging my appearance. And that practitioner will know exactly where to go with that work with you. But if you don't take it there, then you're making therapy an unsafe place, not her. You're taking therapy and you're weaponizing it against yourself. Can you see? And on a defense mechanism level, so if you think about it more as a defense mechanism, well, that's a pretty strong defense, isn't it? Part of your brain's like, oh, we're getting deep in therapy. I like this practitioner. We might get to the root of my problems. I need a massive defense. How can I create that unconscious defense system? I know. I'll make the therapist a person of judgment. Therefore, I won't be able to trust them with all of this really important stuff that I need to explore. So I'll just buy into the belief that I won't give her any of that difficult stuff because I can't trust her, because she may be judging me on my appearance and other things. Can you see how that defense mechanism loads itself and weaponizes that situation that should be about sanctuary? So you need to take that to therapy. And your defense mechanism in your head will now be going, don't listen to her. No, don't take that. Don't take it. This is a ridiculous thing to do. I wish I'd never asked. But that's the defense mechanism that I'm going to tell you not to do it. Just ignore the defense mechanism. That's the tripwire, right? So step over the tripwire. Don't run into it, okay? Take it to therapy. It will be brilliant. And get back to me on how it went. Hi Emma, I've just ended a 6-year relationship. Oh, I'm sorry, with my boyfriend. Oh, as he was abusive and violent. I'm not sorry. I should have read that before I actually said it. I found out that I'm pregnant. But I'm too scared to tell him because he was never wanted any babies. I also didn't consent for him to have sex with me. Any advice, Emma? Well, arguably, if you don't consent, not arguably, the arguably bit is that, do you need to tell him that you're pregnant? I mean, that's something that's a decision for you. It's not a decision for him. So first of all, you don't need to tell him you're pregnant. It's up to you. If you want to have the baby, absolutely have the baby. The bit that's obviously problematic is you're saying that you didn't consent to have sex with him. So he raped you. So you have to ask yourself, do you want to speak to the police about it? because you're pregnant, therefore there is a baby, therefore there is DNA evidence, therefore arguably there is a really good case that you absolutely had sex with him, and as it was abusive and violent, I'm going to make assumptions that you may have had previous encounters with the police, which would therefore mean that there's probably a loaded case to be answered if you were to also go and talk to the police about the fact you've been raped. And then that could present a pretty compelling case in court, which would resolve the fact about the baby because he wouldn't be able to have access to it anyway. And secondly, he'd be in prison, which would mean that you didn't have the concerns about him being free and being around you. The thing I'd do before you kind of move forward is to just look at speaking to the SARC, sexual, it's basically who you speak to, sexual assault in the police, and just have a conversation with them or a SARC clinic and just kind of get examined by them, because there might be some residual issues around the way you've been treated. There's, in different areas, always charities like Rape Crisis, but there's usually like break-off ones. Like we've got one at St Mary's Hospital in Manchester where it's specifically for people who've either been historically abused or have been recently raped, and people can go and talk about those issues and feelings and then come to a decision that's gradual for them. But definitely look at whether you want to go ahead and speak to the police. I think any rape victim should do that. Doesn't mean you have to go and take the case that much further if you don't want to. I just think too many women, too many people hold it in and don't just tell the people that I've been raped, this happened to me. I want to say congratulations on your baby, because your baby's a completely innocent party in this. And if you want to be a mum, then it's still congratulations, although it came from a really horrible experience. And I guess if you're keeping that child, it will resonate that even though this is a tragedy, on one level, it was something that you turned into, I imagine, pure joy at one point. So think about those things. They're big questions, to be answered, and I'm not going to be able to answer them justly or effectively enough in this small amount of time. But look at getting some extra help with that. And definitely the bit where you say that you didn't consent to have sex, just rape. We call it rape. I think that people struggle with that word when they're in a relationship. It's like, well, did he rape me because it's a relationship with him? Yeah, he raped you. That's it. Simple as that. Hi, Emma. If you've got time, I have a question. Is low mood, if a symptom on its own, most likely to be depression? Or are there other mental illnesses with just low mood as a symptom? Okay, well, that's a really interesting question, because if you went to a GP, then if you talked about low mood and then you did a depression questionnaire and it came out that you had low mood, the chances are that they'd offer you something like antidepressants. So the low mood would be treated as if it were a depression. And even if you were dealing with some symptoms that weren't necessarily affecting your emotional mood, but maybe your behavioural mood, even if you were going to go for an assessment with a psychiatrist at some point, the low mood would probably still be treated at that point with something like antidepressants, or in my case, meditate as opposed to medicate. So I would be going down more the exercise route, the relaxation, hypnosis, therapy kind of route, but everybody's different. So it's more to do with, you're asking that question because you feel you've got a low mood. There are other issues that can contribute to that aren't mental health related. So I have really low iron. That makes me hyper anxious at times and can make me really low when I've not got my iron in my system. People who have thyroid problems, people who have vitamin B12 deficiency. These are all things that can cause low mood. So there's a lot of stuff that around us is happening to our bodies because of what we put in our body and what we do with our body that contributes to low mood. So if you're depressed, that can be reactive. So when we explore with our clients what kind of a depression they may have, it could be reactive. So it might be, my dad died, I'm feeling really depressed. So automatically you have this, there was the activation, the death, the grief. And now the reaction, the grief. That's the process. But there are other people who come and say, I just stopped feeling happy. No reason. Everything was fine. Had a great job. Love my husband. Love my kids. Woke up one day. Just felt like I didn't want to be here. And that kind of a depression is also something that many people experience. There'll be no reaction, no trigger that's kind of created that. So you have to kind of, first of all, ask yourself that question. Am I reacting to something that's happened in my life? Is it lockdown, for example? Has that been something that's really created a change in my mood? In which case that would still be reactive. And then it would be, okay, well, what have I done within my parameters that I can create for myself? What have I done that could change some of those feelings? So have I tested it? Because if my assumption is I've got a low mood, therefore I might be depressed, have I tried to shift that using the control aspects that I can within my life? Have I exercised every day? Have I changed my diet to make sure that it's really rich in omega-3 and leafy greens, and I'm really thinking about what I'm putting in my body? You know, when I go out and exercise, am I getting white light on my skin for at least an hour a day? So I'm regulating my melatonin and serotonin levels in my brain. Am I reaching out and speaking to the people around me and saying, I'm struggling a little bit? Am I feeling purpose in my life? Do I feel I've got that vision of where I want to go and be? If you've explored all of those and you've worked on them and then you still have low mood, so it's more of a persistent low mood and it doesn't shift with those variables being affected, then it's definitely worth going and speaking to your GP. They at that point may suggest that you have antidepressants. They at that point may suggest that you have a referral. The other thing is, you said, would there be other things that could fit into other mental health, mental illness diagnoses? Yeah, of course. There are lots where low mood is an associate. So BPD, borderline personality disorder, actually pretty much ADHD, pretty much every single one of them can have low mood attached. Hormonal imbalances that can cause mental health issues, there are loads. The best thing that I'd suggest to you is, first of all, like, do that work around, think about any triggers, what was going on when I started to notice this low mood. Secondly, are there any other behaviours? So are you exhausted? Could it be biological? Are you dealing with something that's more physical going on? Have you really explored what's going on within your life and your experience body-wise? So what you're eating, what you're drinking, how much alcohol you're having. All these things are like really important to explore, because you can kind of be a detective around what depression means to you or is to you, or whether depression is a side effect of the way you're living, or whether the low mood depression is contributing to a bigger picture, which is a mental illness that you haven't explored with a practitioner like a psychiatrist who can look at all these other variables that are going on, such as impulsivity or mania or any of those things. So that comes down to an individual actually sitting down and working with you on that level. But like I said, before you get to that, I think just do a bit of due diligence, a bit of detective work on the self, and just look at those categories I was talking about, because often we don't do that. I've currently finished in an abusive relationship. My partner had BPD. Some of the things he's done to me, he doesn't believe he's done. One was assaulting me when I was pregnant, and currently our child has been taken away temporarily for safety issues with him. I need to get over the relationship, but we were so codependent and I miss him. How can I learn to deal with being without my child and also him? I feel like I've lost it all. I wanted to be a family. Now I have no partner and my child is currently gone. I'm going to put my bias on here. So less professional, more personal. Please feel that you're able to ignore this. It will sound judgment based because it's coming from a personal bias. So I want you to understand this is not coming from a professional place. It's coming from a personal bias. So you're absolutely allowed to think this is bollocks, essentially. I think right now your child is the only thing that has priority. That doesn't mean your feelings aren't important. I'm going to talk about those in a minute. But I need to bring your child to the center stage. Your child is an innocent participant in a situation that arguably they have no control over, but you have lots of control over. Your child needs you, and they need you to be fully aware of how important you are for them. You are their lifeline to so many things. You are their comfort, their soothing. You are the person that they belong to, that have roots to. They need you to be on your A game. And that might feel really hard to hear, but I need to tell you that because right now your child hasn't got a voice. Your child needs to be home with a loving parent who chooses them. That's my real opinion. So if you're telling me that you miss him as well as your ex, then you need to focus missing him, because you can change that. You can change the life of your child. You can make sure that he gets to come home and have his mum and maybe have supervised contact with his dad elsewhere, but that he's the priority, that he needs to have that message, that loud and clear message you're my priority. You count more than my ex. You count more than your dad. He needs to hear that. Every child needs to hear that they are the most important person in the world to their mother or father. Your child's already struggling because dad obviously hasn't got that priority base sealed. He hasn't got it knocked off. He hasn't. You have. You understand it. You understand what it's like to love. You understand what it's like to lose. You don't want your son to lose more than he's already lost. But then on codependency, of course you miss him. So to those of you who don't know what codependency means, basically imagine being in a relationship, and two people can be codependent in a relationship. It doesn't have to be that there's a dependent and a codependent, but codependency basically means I will sacrifice everything about myself to make sure you have your needs met. And then I'll be so confused by who I am, because all I've done is go out of my way to meet your needs, that I'll never really know whether I deserved to feel so worthless or whether I deserved to be so abused, because I spent so much time bending and shaping to ensure that you were happy, and yet I failed. And that's the confused cycle of codependency. And the only way to restore a sense of self-dependency, individual dependency, the sense of I can control the world that I live in, I have power of myself, is to completely pull away from it and to be alone. And that's hard, because how can you be alone when you spent all this time giving to this person who's essentially failed you? The fact that you're even entertaining a conversation with your ex who has problems like BPD, fair enough. That I've worked with lots of BPD people. It's very rare that people don't remember what they've done. It's a really convenient excuse. Oh, I didn't remember doing that. Maybe if he was drunk, I would get that. Some people are violent when they're drunk and they don't remember it. Irrespective, they've still done the damage. So you're in a situation where it doesn't really matter whether he remembers or not. What matters is he did it. You see, what you're doing there with that codependent attitude is you're listening to his opinion, and it has meaning to you, and you're thinking, well, maybe it didn't happen. That's what codependency does to you. Of course it happened. It happened to the point where your child's been taken away from you. So I want you to just bring it back to center stage and say, what you need more than anything is your son in priority with you. He needs you to really be aware that he needs you more than you'll ever be needed by any man. You want codependency? Your child is entirely dependent on you, entirely. And you can be everything to that child because you bend and shape and break for this man who hurts you. Well, imagine if you just put all of that into your child's life, just being the most flexible, loving, connected mother who can give that child all the love, because that's what people have who are codependent. They're desperate for love. They give love so freely. You need to give your love so freely to your child. And then social services will give your child back, and you won't feel broken in this way. You've done nothing wrong. You've been a victim. And you have your self-esteem, your self-worth, your sense of who you are stripped away. It's what abusers do. And then you're left thinking, there's no point. It'll never change. I may as well just accept that this is my life. And that's the cycle of abuse. I know it might sound a bit judgy what I said regarding your child, but maybe one of the reasons you've ended up in these relationships is because you didn't have the best attachment to your own parents. Maybe you didn't get to feel as valuable, as worthwhile as you deserved. Do you want that for your child? Or do you want your child to know that even though they were taken away from you for a period of time, that you fought hard and that you fought strong and that you fought right to get him back? So that in those moments of questioning that he'll have as he grows, he'll have an answer every time. She was there for me. She came back for me. She worked hard for me. She did right by me. Those are what can change children who have attachment issues' lives, because you essentially fill in the gaps so that they understand that whilst it might have been tough at times, you are completely on their side. You need help as well. You know, I would definitely speak to Women's Aid, Refuge, any of those who offer support groups and helplines. You need to realise that you are a product of what's happened to you, a product of your environment, a product of your relationship with him, but you're out of it now. You're only going to get what you got if you go back to it. Bad love might be love, but it's bad love. It will never be good. And you deserve good love. And your child deserves good love. And you can create good love on your terms, in your time, in your place. Hi, Emma. Due to my autism, I was too shy to phone in this morning. How does one form a romantic relationship with women? I'm really glad that you asked tonight though, but don't ever feel like you can't call in to this morning. They're my friends, the people on the phone lines, and they're lovely, I promise you. So please don't feel like you can't. They're so nice. And you don't have to go on TV. They can just write down the question if you want it. And remember, that question that you've just asked me, that question's a really good question. There'll be lots of people who feel like they can't ask those. So you doing that on national TV or even here, it's really brave of you. And it's great that you do because so many people relate to it. The thing about any relationship, it's not whether it's women or men. The main thing that you need to think about is, firstly, what do I like about my life? So literally, look at the things that you like, whether that's music, football, dancing, cooking. You can do this by literally sitting down and writing a list. Qualities that I like about life. Because you're going to want to make sure that the person that you connect with is going to reflect some of those. Just so you've got interests that are similar. When you've got those interests refined, that's really helpful. Because now you've got insight into potential places to meet that person. Now online, you can do that by writing down those interests and expressing to a potential person who sees a picture of you that these are the things that you're interested in. Or arguably, you can go and sign up for some of the things that you're interested in that will make it more active group-wise. So a rambling group or a photography group or a drama group, doesn't matter. That will give you interests in the real world where you can meet other people, and it will give you online the opportunity to seem like a good deal to those who are window shopping, right? I also think with autism, it can be really helpful to just be honest with the person, so you can even have it in your bio, because it's a part of who you are. It's one of those things that if people understand, because remember, autism is not a problem with feeling, it's a problem with expressing it at times, yeah? So it's helping people to know that you are more than your particular classification, but that you're also somebody who's proud of the fact that it forms part of who you are. So I'd be really honest with that. Look, there are specialist agencies if you feel that you really can't find the nerve to connect with a woman online or offline on your own. So there are some specialist agencies who will work with you, and they're specifically for people who might be atypical, so neurodiverse. These kind of things exist. So do look up online those kind of options, because that might make you feel a little bit more easy. The main thing is, if I'm really honest, what anybody wants in a relationship is somebody who's kind, trustworthy, open, honest, gives you a hug when you need a hug, reminds you that you're beautiful even when you feel that you're not. Autism doesn't prevent you from connecting with anybody on those levels. Sometimes confidence-wise it can impact, because everyone thinks that love is meant to look a certain way, but it doesn't. Love just looks however love is when it finds you, usually in the strangest of circumstances and without any warning. So just be open to it. Just be open. Work on your confidence. Acknowledge that there is going to be a woman out there who is going to think you are the bee's knees, the sliced bread, the person that they can picture spending the rest of their lives with. And all you need to do is to start focusing on how to expand those social networks so that you can connect with the perfect other half. It would be wonderful. But like I said, look at those specialist agencies if you're struggling to meet in a more typical way, typical fashion. The digital landscape can be really quite throwaway and can be really challenging for people with depth who actually really want a relationship of worth. That's not a you thing. It's not because you've got autism that it isn't happening. It's happening to everyone. It's a really throwaway landscape out there, but it's not representative of a massive part of the population, okay? So explore that as well. It's a good question. Hi Emma, do you have any advice about not returning to self-harming? Sometimes it feels like the only way to stop the urges to go through with it. I feel so hopeless and helpless with depression, blaming myself for my sister's suicide after we had an argument. She said it was my fault. I feel triggered it. Say that again. So, hi Emma, do you have any advice about not returning to self-harming? Sometimes it feels the only way to stop the urge to go through with it. I feel so helpless and helpless with depression and blaming myself for sister's suicide after we had an argument. She said it was my fault. I feel triggered by it. Just somebody's. I just don't get the say it said it was my fault, because obviously your sister couldn't have said that. So I'm just trying to process where that fits in. So the self-harming, one of the things you've got to acknowledge is it's a coping strategy. It's a bad one. It's a really bad one. I'm not going to lie, it's a terrible coping strategy. But at least you tried to get one. And I say that because it's really easy to kind of say to somebody, oh, that's a stupid thing to do. You know, why are you doing that? Stop doing it. It's like, it's a coping strategy. It's just a really bad one that we need to improve it. That's it. So at least you've tried to find one. Give yourself a pat on the back for that, because people often do things like take their own life because they haven't had any ways of alleviating the stress. What you need to think about now is, well, this isn't an effective one. Self-harm is not effective. One, it causes you to wear your abuse, the self-abuse, for the rest of your life, and you don't deserve that. Secondly, it can lead to big problems, such as cutting too deep and actually ending up harming yourself permanently. And on top of that, it kind of means that you walk around feeling like you can't really show who you are to people, because you feel like you're wearing your story on yourself a lot of the time. So you cover yourself up. You don't feel like you're allowed to go to places that you'd be social, and all those things that are just so problematic for just having a full life. So there's an app called Calm Harm. That's really good. I would definitely recommend that. Calm Harm helps you to understand your triggers and also gives you alternative methods to contemplate using when you're dealing with those periods of stress. Secondly, I'm sorry about your sister's suicide. That's obviously a completely different complex issue. I don't know who said it's your fault. I don't know where that fits in, because it looks like it said that your sister blamed you, which is why I was a bit confused, but apologies for that. I don't know whether it's your mother that was saying it, because I've just seen something else come up. Right, okay, Pete's just kind of waffled something there, but I can't see it. So yeah, so I don't know whether somebody's blamed you for it. It's not your fault. You know, we all blame ourselves with suicide. We all do. It's the most natural state, because you want to prevent it. So if I can blame myself for something, then I can arguably find a way to not let it happen again. So if I take control and say, well, my dad's death was my fault because I didn't do A, B, and C, then if it ever happened again, I'd think, all right, this is what I do. But it's just counterproductive. It's only productive when it actually shifts a change and can make a difference to your life. It won't. Just let that go. But the Calm Harm app is really good. Don't try and handle self-harm on your own. Get that self-help. Speak to your doctor if you can. Do whatever it takes. But don't blame yourself for a coping strategy. But just acknowledge that the coping strategy has outlived its days. It's outlived and outmoded its time of usefulness. It's time to move through it. And it's hard, but you can absolutely do it. And you've already maintained it for a period of time. And if you've gone through your sister's suicide whilst not harming, which it sounds like you have, I mean, you can face anything. I mean, you don't even need to be asking me that question, because you've already manifested an amazing amount of coping to have got through that. Well done. It sends you completely under when somebody you love kills himself. Hi Emma, I suffer with BPD. I'm attached to my therapist in a mother way. She knows of this, but I'm scared of her leaving. Any helpful tips on how to cope with fear? Oh, I really love the fact that this is one of the things that really does my head in about the assumptions, myths. Sorry, I'm using you as an example before I even start this. I'm using you as an example. This is what really annoys me about the fears of the public towards BPD and the stereotypes and myths associated with borderline personality disorder. Because what you've just heard in that question statement is a really well-adjusted, grown human being who is able to express not only their understanding of BPD within the context of how they experience it, but also the way that therapy can promote the most beautiful exchanges and changes, but also create a sense of fear and abandonment, which is obviously a big part of the BPD experience. But if you think about how amazing and succinctly and authentically that expression was by somebody who is classified as BPD, you can understand my frustration when there are all these myths and stereotypes thrown at people with borderline personality disorder. I've always said to those of you who come into my clinics, borderline personality disorder, I've met some of the best clients, the nicest clients, the warmest, the most incredible clients who are BPD. And I think that what you just expressed in that statement just really personifies how incorrectly people view that particular classification. Putting that aside, you are going to have those feelings, particularly if you have trauma, particularly if that trauma is associated to things like attachment issues, attachment disorder, because your biggest feeling of fear is the fact that one day you'll be abandoned, right? And you'll get into that repetitive pattern. But I want you to just hold faith and just understand. Trust the process of therapy. The process is that it's okay to have that fear. It's natural, it's normal. And actually by being able to regulate that, and to say to yourself, you know what, of course I'm nervous and sad and anxious about the idea of this great relationship with this incredible therapist that I really care for, that ending, but I can regulate that that is a normal experience to have. It's one that I know will happen, but it's also one I'm going to feel prepared for. Your practitioner understands the transference and counter-transference that's going on within the mother-child relationship. And it's her job to grow you up to a point where it still hurts, it's going to hurt, but that you're ready for your exit. And remember, when you exit, she's not abandoning you. You're ready to leave her because you've done the work. It's a celebration, and it's not permanent because you can always check in 6 months down the line, just have a session, make sure that you're in a situation where you feel that you've got it working on track. You can have that conversation with her. But for me, this is a perfect therapeutic dynamic where you're both aware of those counter-transference and transference experiences, and you acknowledge that these are real between you, and that you are talking about that dynamic and working it through. And from that, only great things can come. And trust in the process, and trust that she's going to know how to do that with you. And whilst it will be painful when you say goodbye in that respect, because it's a special relationship, she will have brought you through the cycle of understanding that you can experience really good relationships that come to an end, that are right to come to an end, and that don't take something from you, that actually do the opposite. They package something up and they give it you as a gift, and you take that away. And that's what you're doing right now. You're not quite wrapped up, you've not quite got it gift boxed, but you're on the way, and that will be yours forever. And that's always going to be because of that dynamic that's been going on in your relationship. So thank you for sharing that with me. That's great therapy. Hi Emma, is it healthy to cry when you're sad, or can it increase depression? The research says that people who cry often feel a sense of relief afterwards. And certainly when you look at the cortisol and adrenaline levels of somebody who's had a good sob, it's lower. So whilst you might feel sadder afterwards, you also feel soothed. So arguably our animal instinct, which creates the provocation of tears and then the obvious experience of them, it's there for a reason, it's there for a purpose. So crying, even though you're depressed, is also release. It's a way of just like letting go. And when you feel really depressed, often you just feel nothing sometimes, just dense, thick, voluminous nothingness, like emptiness, whereas tears are so full. So there's a real connection with feeling. So don't be afraid of them. Allow them to be part of your process. And that doesn't mean you want to be crying all the time, but just listen to what's going on. I'd much rather somebody say I sat and cried than I went and got a piece of chocolate cake or I went and had a brandy. I'd rather you really connect with that feeling and let it be. Just allow it to be part of your experience. And when you are crying, the other thing that I'd say is if there are trusted people, it's really powerful to share it. Just to have a friend who you can call, or a partner. I know that can feel really vulnerable orientated, you know, it can do, really like exposing, but it's really a beautiful thing to be able to sit and just sob. And I really struggle with that. But I know that on the occasions when I've allowed that to be the case, you know, it's a really soothing moment. I've had a few friends where I've just sobbed, and even though there's a bit of me that's like, well, that's just going to be really embarrassing, it isn't. And it's always a real gift for the person who's allowed to share that. So try to think about some safe places that there are that you can go with some of that. Sometimes, you know, not all the times, just sometimes where you feel like you can share that, because it's a privilege for the person to be involved. Any advice for PTSD, how to help myself with it? I mean, PTSD is complex, isn't it? It's one of those things that whilst I want to say, yeah, this is what you can do, I also want to make sure that you're getting some help, because PTSD is a big deal. Now, you might need to wait for a long time for that help. I always feel like I'm just like a parrot repeating that statement. I really do at the moment. So many people on waiting lists, and I get it. But PTSD is a life-limiting, complex disorder that requires quite a lot of help and support. If you're not getting that, I would love you to try and get some of that in place. Also, if you can afford it, there are some, what I would consider, effective techniques that can really make a difference, right? So EMDR is something that I think would be really effective for you. So EMDR works really, really well with trauma. And also, people talk about PTSD and EMDR as having quite unique time frames in which people work through what they consider to be a very long-term problem. For whatever reason, it reprocesses the memories that cause the trauma in an area of the brain that can interpret it and work with it in a much healthier way. And it also desensitizes the actual feelings. So you don't just reprogram the brain to see the experience and memories in a certain way that's different to the way you're seeing them now. It then reprocesses the way that it's stored, basically meaning that you also desensitize yourself to the experience. That neutralizes the trauma. So if you haven't had EMDR, I would explore that. You can get it on the NHS, but you will have to go to a clinical psychologist who has also trained in EMDR. And EMDR is eye movements. Some of you will also seen the EFT, which is the tapping that Harry was doing. Now, people do talk about EMDR with the eyes and the tapping. I just see it as the eyes, but nonetheless, some practitioners will use both. EFT, you can actually get online for free. You can look at EFT and emotional freedom technique. Just have a look. That might be something that will be helpful, but EMDR would be something I definitely suggest. And I think that if you can get it for free, that would be even better, but there'll be a long waiting list. That's why I always think that therapy is one of those privileges. You know, if you've got some spare cash, then it's worth investing it. So you get shortcut through the queue, get therapy and move forward. The other thing I'd say is that remember, PTSD is always going to be to do with high anxiety, so anything that reduces anxiety. That can be something as simple as having a really hot bath 2 hours before you go to sleep. And I mean really, really hot, like insanely hot, you know, not burning your skin off hot, but really hot, because you want after 2 hours it'll cool and you'll sleep a lot more easily. It'll help with dream state. That would help. Anything that's relaxation based before you go to sleep. So whether you listen to a relaxation stream on YouTube, some people like things like ASMR. Drives me mad. Hate it. ASMR is awful. The devil. But some people love it. People have millions of hits on it on YouTube. The idea of watching somebody chew food, to me, makes me want to just like be violent. It does, makes me want to be violent, I'm going to be honest. But people like that stuff, or like cutting Play-Doh for like 7 hours. It does work. People get like a brain orgasm. Don't even know what that feels like. Yeah, good, I suppose, but apparently that's what happens to about 40% of the population. I missed out on that memo. So otherwise I'd be sat now watching Play-Doh, believe me. Those are the kind of things that I do. Hi Emma, I hope you're feeling well. I wonder if you could give us some advice for coping or overcoming avoidant personality disorder or severe social anxiety. I always feel so inhibited, self-conscious, and my mind goes blank. I struggle with simple things as having a conversation, let alone being good and fun company, and matching the liveliness of everyone else who makes it seem so effortless. Totally know where you're coming from with that. I know people must be judging me and thinking how boring I am. It makes me feel really worthless and humiliated, so I just avoid social situations such as possible. When I'm just with one or two people, I feel very comfortable. it's not so bad. But something's getting me down now. People are planning more social gatherings. Okay. First of all, your opinion of yourself will be incorrect. You'll see yourself as really boring, but the fact that you've got friends shows you that you're not boring at all. You've just got an idea that as soon as you hit a group, you go from being that really likeable person that your mates like hanging out with to nobody likes me, because you're really aware of the group. It makes you feel super anxious, and the consequences that closes you down. So there are things that you can do. We do it in confidence coaching. I've talked about it on here before, so apologies if you've heard it before, but rehearsal. It's really important to rehearse when it comes down to big groups. I always talk about getting 5 questions that you can literally learn, that you can ask anyone. Just 5 open-ended questions, from asking them what they do for a living and whether they enjoy it, right through to the kind of activities that they get up to. Just 5 generic questions that you can ask anyone. The truth is, in social situations, people just like to talk about themselves. If you've got a little bit of confidence, you don't feel that you've got confidence at the moment, so you can be the one who kind of asks the leading questions. Secondly, make sure that your buddies are aware of the way that you feel. When you say you like hanging out with 2 friends and you get on really well and it's fine, they're your buddies. How do you get them to help you feel that you always have an ally? Because that's what you need at a party. My thing at parties was always the same, like, you go with somebody and you'd be like, don't leave me, and then they'll leave you. And it's almost like, on reflection, I need to be much more firm and real about that. More like, I will not come to a party with you ever again if you leave me. Take me with you wherever you go, because I don't like being on my own in a party and I don't know what to say to people. So just be very clear. You're adults. Just say to them, I really struggle with social anxiety. Going to parties is something that terrifies me, but I do want to be able to socially engage. Can you please help me to feel that you are an ally that I can kind of walk around with? And don't feel afraid of telling people how you feel. So genuinely, a lot of people do not believe me, and I appreciate that a lot of people won't believe me when I say this. My husband will tell you it's true. My brother will tell you it's true. I tell people constantly when I go places that I've just got total social anxiety. So I will literally say to the person, I have like total social anxiety. And you'll be amazed at how lovely people are to you, because it's almost like the elephant in the room's gone. I don't need to say, I really find these things awkward. I just say it, and it's really helped. So when I used to have to go to networking events, I just immediately say to people, I really hate these events. I don't find it easy to socialize with strangers at all. It makes me feel really awkward. And everyone was like, totally get it. They get it. And even the most confident person would just like, I totally understand it. Or somebody would say, God, I'd never have thought about you. And I'd be like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. So own it. One of the things when you're working with people on the spectrum who have autism, very often they mask the way that they feel. And that means that the world is constantly exhausting, and constantly they have to think about everybody else's needs and not about their own needs. My job is to help them go, no, I have to think about my needs. That's the only need I have to think about. And then when you think about your needs and you're open about who you are and what's going on for you, other people just accept it. So there are things that I do. Rehearse, tell your buddies, get them to be allies, wingmen, whatever it is, and absolutely be honest. Just everyone in life, everyone is a little bit screwed up. I have not met a human yet where I have gone away going, totally balanced. That person's got it all together. Absolutely. Want to be like that. Just within 5 minutes of talking to anybody, I'll know that there is loads of stuff that's gone on for them. And that's great, because everybody is broken into a billion pieces. And some of us have just got our mosaic looking a little bit more how it's meant to look, and some of us are still working on it, and some of us are still lost some of the pieces, you know? We're all in that place. Just don't ever forget, no human being is unscathed. Every human being is dealing with something, and no human being is just like this perfect working order. And the ones who present most like that are often the ones who go home and drink gin and cry. Believe me, the way that we live these days in this crazy capitalist culture where communities are being totally decimated and individualistic thinking is considered the norm, everyone's completely broken within it because it stinks. So just know that when you're struggling, you're probably doing something correct because you're fighting against something that feels foreign. That's kind of a roundup to obviously a bigger issue that's at hand that I was just summing up there, because I think we all feel it, don't we? I don't know what to say about what's happened in government. I do know hypocrisy when I see it. I do know hypocrites when I smell them, and it's been a strong smell, particularly in the last few days. We'll get where we need to go. Like I said, the end game never ends how the end game is believed to be ending. And that's what makes a journey interesting. Just buckle up. We're still on the ride, right? We're still on the ride.